Ethan sat cross-legged on the edge of the bed, fiddling with a loose thread on his jeans. The room was quiet, save for the soft hum of the ceiling fan. Ryan, sprawled on the carpet, glanced up at his best friend, his expression open and expectant. "I can't believe it's already our junior year," Ryan said, his voice light, though his eyes held something deeper. "Feels like just yesterday we were kids sneaking into the arcade." Ethan managed a small smile but didn't respond. His mind was elsewhere, replaying moments he'd rather forget. Jordan's warm hand in his, the stolen kisses, and the undeniable guilt that followed. Every time he was with Jordan, he could feel Ryan's trust hovering like a ghost in the room, a silent reminder of the friendship he was putting at risk. "Hey," Ryan said, sitting up and narrowing his gaze. "You've been weird all week." "What's up?" Ethan stiffened. "Nothing. Just tired, I guess." Ryan tilted his head, unconvinced. "You're lying." His tone was teasing, but there was an undercurrent of genuine concern. "Come on, you can tell me anything. You know that." The words hit Ethan like a punch to the chest. He looked away, his fingers still pulling at the thread, now unraveling the hem of his jeans. The truth burned at the back of his throat, but he couldn't bring himself to say it. "Not yet." Ryan sighed, flopping back onto the carpet. "You've always been the mysterious one, Ethan. It's like you carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. You don't have to, you know. I'm here." Ethan swallowed hard, guilt clawing at him. Ryan's kindness only made it worse. He remembered the day Ryan had confessed, sitting in this very room, his voice trembling as he admitted his feelings for Jordan. "I know it's stupid," Ryan had said, "but I really like him." Ethan had promised to support him, to be there no matter what. And yet, weeks later, he'd broken that promise. "Do you ever feel like," Ethan began, his voice barely above a whisper, "like you've made a mistake you can't undo?" Ryan turned his head, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "What kind of mistake?" Ethan hesitated. The words were on the tip of his tongue, but fear held them back. He couldn't bear to see the light in Ryan's eyes dim, to watch their friendship crumble under the weight of his betrayal. "I don't know," Ethan said finally, his voice shaky. "Forget I said anything." Ryan frowned but didn't push. "You're being weird, but okay. Just don't shut me out, all right?" Ethan nodded, but the weight in his chest only grew heavier. He knew he couldn't keep the secret much longer. And when the truth came out, he'd have to face the consequences, whatever they might be. As Ryan turned back to the ceiling, the unspoken tension lingered in the air, thick and suffocating. Ethan stared at the fraying thread in his hand, wondering how much more of his life would unravel before he found the courage to speak. The silence in the room was deafening. Ethan sat at the edge of the bed, his shoulders hunched as if trying to shrink under the weight of his guilt. Across from him, Ryan sat cross-legged on the floor, watching him with a furrowed brow. His easygoing demeanor from earlier had been replaced by concern, and that concern made Ethan's chest tighten. "Ethan," Ryan said softly, leaning forward. "Whatever it is, just tell me. I can handle it." Ethan's throat felt dry. He couldn't meet Ryan's gaze. Instead, his eyes fixed on the pattern of the carpet, as though it held the words he didn't have the courage to say. But the longer he stayed silent, the heavier the tension became, until it felt like it might crush him entirely. Taking a deep breath, Ethan finally spoke. "Ryan, I need to tell you something. It's about Jordan." Ryan blinked, his face a mixture of confusion and caution. "Jordan?" Ethan nodded, his hands gripping the edge of the bed, so tightly his knuckles turned white. He paused, forcing himself to keep going. "I've been seeing him for a while now." For a moment, Ryan didn't react. He sat perfectly still, his expression blank as if his brain needed a moment to process the words. Then his brow furrowed, and a flicker of disbelief crossed his face. What? His voice was quiet, but the single word cut through the air like a knife. I'm sorry, Ethan said quickly, his words tumbling over each other. I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did. Ryan stood up abruptly, his movements sharp and jerky. You didn't mean for it to happen? He repeated, his voice rising. You knew how I felt about him. You knew, Ethan. I know. Ethan's voice cracked. I know I messed up. I shouldn't have, he stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Ryan took a step back, shaking his head. You were supposed to be my best friend. You knew I liked him, and you went behind my back anyway. Do you even care about me? About what this does to me? I care, Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. I care more than you know. That's why I'm telling you now. Oh, great, Ryan said bitterly, his arms crossed. You get to clear your conscience, and I get to feel like an idiot. Thanks for that. Ethan flinched at the words but didn't argue. He knew he deserved them. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The room felt too small, too suffocating. Finally, Ryan exhaled sharply and turned toward the door. I need some air, he muttered, not looking back as he left the room. Ethan sat alone in the silence, the weight of Ryan's absence heavier than he could have imagined. His chest ached, but he knew this wasn't the end. He'd torn open the truth, but the consequences were just beginning. Ethan sat motionless on the bed, staring at the door Ryan had slammed shut behind him. The echo of his best friend's retreating footsteps still lingered in his ears, like the fading remnants of something irreparably broken. The silence in the room was unbearable now, heavy with everything left unsaid. He reached for his phone on the nightstand, his fingers trembling as he typed out a message to Ryan. But every word felt wrong, hollow. I'm sorry wasn't enough, could never be enough. Sighing, he tossed the phone aside and buried his face in his hands. Minutes stretched into hours, though Ethan had lost all sense of time. His mind replayed the scene over and over. Ryan's hurt expression, the anger in his voice, and the raw betrayal etched across his face. Ethan had known this moment would hurt, but the reality of it was far worse than anything he'd imagined. A soft knock at the door broke his spiral of thoughts. Ethan's heart leapt, hope sparking for a brief moment. Ryan, he called out, his voice shaky. The door creaked open, and Ryan stepped inside. His eyes were red, his face pale. He didn't speak at first, simply standing there, as though gathering the strength to face Ethan again. I needed time to think, Ryan said finally, his voice low and strained. Ethan nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Ryan crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed, keeping a careful distance between them. For a long moment, they both stared at the floor, the tension between them palpable. I don't even know where to start, Ryan said, breaking the silence. You were the one person I thought I could always trust. And now, I don't know. His voice cracked on the last word, and he quickly looked away. Ethan felt the sting of those words like a physical blow. I know I betrayed you, he said softly, and I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed to tell you the truth. You deserved that much. Ryan shook his head, letting out a bitter laugh. The truth? You think telling me now makes it better? You lied to me, Ethan. For weeks. And Jordan, he trailed off, swallowing hard. Ethan's chest tightened. Jordan didn't mean anything. Not like you do. You're my best friend, Ryan. And I've ruined that. I know I have. But I'd do anything to make it right. Ryan looked at him then, his eyes filled with a mix of pain and something softer. Maybe understanding, maybe just exhaustion. I don't know if we can go back to how things were, he admitted. But I don't want to lose you completely. Not yet. Ethan nodded, tears threatening to spill over. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. As they sat together in the quiet, the weight between them felt a little lighter. The road to mending their friendship would be long and uncertain, but for now, they had a fragile thread of hope to hold on to. The following days passed in a haze for Ethan. He moved through his routines with a quiet heaviness, the memory of Ryan's pain replaying like a loop in his mind. The fragile thread of hope they'd left on that night felt thinner with each passing hour, stretched taut under the weight of his guilt and Ryan's silence. Every notification on his phone made his chest tighten, but Ryan didn't text, didn't call. Ethan considered reaching out, but stopped himself each time. The damage was already done. Maybe Ryan needed space, or maybe their friendship was beyond saving. It was late one evening when Ethan's phone finally buzzed. The screen lit up with Ryan's name. Heart pounding. Ethan unlocked it and read the message. "Can we talk?" At the park. The words were simple, but they carried a weight that left Ethan breathless. He grabbed his jacket and headed out without hesitation, the winter chill biting at his skin as he made his way to the park. When he arrived, Ryan was already there, sitting on one of the swings. His hands were stuffed into his jacket pockets, his breath visible in the cold air. Ethan approached slowly, unsure of what to say or how to act. Ryan didn't look up as Ethan sat on the swing beside him. For a moment, the only sound was the creak of the chains swaying in the quiet night. "I've been thinking," Ryan said finally, his voice steady but subdued. "About us. About everything." Ethan nodded, gripping the cold metal chains. "And," he asked, his voice barely audible. Ryan sighed, his breath clouding in the air. "I'm still angry and hurt, but I keep coming back to one thing. You told me the truth. You could have lied, could have kept it hidden, but you didn't. That has to count for something, right?" Ethan swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. He didn't feel like he deserved any credit for his confession, but he stayed quiet, letting Ryan speak. "I don't know if I can trust you again," Ryan continued, his voice tinged with sadness. "But I don't want to lose you either. What you did, it hurt. More than I can explain. But losing you completely? I think that would hurt even more." Ethan's chest tightened, his emotions threatening to spill over. "I'll do whatever it takes," he said, his voice trembling, "to earn your trust back. I don't care how long it takes, Ryan. I'll prove to you that I'm still the friend you deserve." Ryan looked at him then, his expression softer than Ethan had expected. "It's not going to be easy," he said, "but maybe we can figure it out. One step at a time." Ethan nodded, relief washing over him. The road ahead would